Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Citizen Representatives podcast. My name is Tyler with my friend Adam. Adam, how do you like being known as my friend Adam?
I'm getting used to it. It's taken some time, but this is our 10th podcast.
Number 10.
Is that right? Wow. We we must be good friends now.
We're in it for the long haul. It's number 10, double digits. I'm not sure that we've cracked double digits in viewers yet, but we're making our way there.
I think we're going to look back on these episodes and go, yeah, that was training wheels. Like we're really going to hit our groove here in about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years.
So I'm still
I mean,
working on
months.
months. I'm still working on, and I'm kind of looking at it in a similar vein, in a similar way. You know, I really felt like I needed to get something out there to the world. And even though this is kind of rough and it's not polished really, it's we're learning the kind of the process. We're adding to our quote unquote talent stack, and we're doing things that will help us in the long run. Once we get a kind of a little bit of a library here, then I'm going to really start promoting it with ads and things like that. And we'll show a little video that I produced yesterday, and that will be something that will help us along the way. Um, so how are you doing?
Great. It's Tuesday, Taco Tuesday. Um, I worked hard this morning, and yeah,
So do you like
I
your
don't know what else.
tacos, a crispy corn taco? Because there are so many different tacos, and I think we've had this
Yeah.
conversation before. It's amazing what can be done with tortillas, beans, and rice, just the number of combinations that there are.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on who's preparing and what meats are used. I can eat just about any kind of taco. I don't mind a fish taco. I'm kind of I love carnitas, asada. I kind of don't mind just a good old ground beef taco from Del Taco, the Del Taco.
So what
Uh,
type of tacos do they have in Spain? Because you served for a couple years for, as you served a mission for a couple years in Spain. There's no tacos there, are there?
I don't remember any. No, it's the big one is tortilla de patata, which is basically an omelet with potato and onion, right? Big thick egg. Um, that's kind of like the go-to for any meal. It's like when you don't have anything else, here we grill a cheese sandwich. What are you having for dinner? We'll have a cheese sandwich, grilled cheese. There, it's tortilla de patata. My favorite meal, and that's well known, paella
Yeah.
Valenciana, right? You've heard of that. Rice and meat, vegetables. Yeah, lots of seafood, but tacos, no. They're big on breads, but not like tortilla type. I didn't have a lot of tortilla stuff. I mean, there's a lot of South Americans there, so sometimes you dine with them and you'd have some good South American food, but
See, I served my
no
mission
tacos.
in Southern California, so there were tacos aplenty. So we had all different kinds, and uh, I gained
Authentic tacos, right?
authentic, authentic tacos. Of course, well, not of course, many don't know my grandmother on my mom's side is Hispanic, and um, she made these tortillas that were so thick and just soft, and I mean, just amazing. So I've got different flavors from everywhere, but I tend to like a thick flour tortilla with hot. Pretty good, making my mouth water. I gained quite a few pounds on my mission through the food there, and I
And the
I
MTC.
gained 40 pounds. The
I
MTC, for
I
those who don't know, it's where the missionaries train for a while before they go out. What were you gonna say?
No, I'm probably pretty close to that. I probably gained in my first 3 months. Well, between the MTC, which was 2 months, and then another 3 months, 2 to 3 months in the mission, I probably gained close to 40 pounds.
I gained
It's
15 in the
weird.
MTC.
It's weird when you bend over and you're tying your shoes and you can feel like a bunch of rolls, and you're like, "Oh, that's not normal for a 19-year-old kid that used to be really athletic and skinny." So I
Well, the
quickly
problem,
got into shape.
oh, really? See, I didn't
Yeah.
get into shape at all until I got home. I, I just let it go. On the MTC, there was all you can eat. And so they had these fruit pies. I don't, they had the Hostess fruit pies. And um, I had a stash of those. And so just on fruit pies, I think I gained 5 pounds. And then the rest, I gained another 10. And I had to send my
Well, you
suits home by the time I was in my second area. I had to send them home because my
oh,
legs didn't
ouch.
fit. Well, it wasn't
Ouch.
the reason I had to send them home. My second area. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this. I had a bike, or I had a car my whole mission except for one area, and that second area I had a bike. And so the combination of eating a lot plus biking up and down hills, my legs got big, and so they
Yeah.
no longer fit. It wasn't like I didn't look fat at all. My legs just got big, and so I had to send my suits home.
Yeah.
So
Do they call you Pudge?
no, I was still tall and skinny.
Yeah.
I mean, I was so skinny that I put on 40 pounds, and people still called me skinny.
You were you wore it well. We walked
I wore it
everywhere in my
well.
mission, so it was pretty easy. Buses, trains, but mostly walking.
Yeah, we walked to and from the car, and so
That's a
and we
problem.
had air conditioning. We had,
Stateside missions, they're so cake.
stateside Spanish speaking. We had the best of
Meals
both
with
worlds, in my
members every
opinion.
night.
Exactly. So I'm trying to again figure out how to segue into this story. Um, this first, I guess it's related to Utah. I don't know how. I
Oh,
mean, other
yay.
than other than that, I mean, it just doesn't. Utah, I really like the state, but sometimes it's just like, "Oh, that came out of Utah,"
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
we're the story is. Oh, first of all, I wanted to ask a silly question. Have you been visited by ABC4 to get your side of the story for your donation to that homeless bum who happens to be racist?
I'm looking forward to it. Um, I sent my contact information, my address, and so I'm expecting a visit any day.
So ABC4 is one of the what are their four main stations in Utah?
Yep.
There was this data breach that that showed that a paramedic in Utah had donated $10 to the Kyle Rittenhouse Defense Fund. Kyle Rittenhouse is an individual who has been accused of killing two people, I believe, in Wisconsin. Many think he was acting in self-defense, and the video seems to show that. But it's not allowed to. You're not allowed to commit to or to contribute to someone's self-defense or their defense fund nowadays. So, regardless of what the video shows, you're not allowed to do that. And so the story. Let's just play this story real quick. So let's share this.
New tonight, a data breach at a crowdfunding website shows a paramedic from Utah donated to the defense fund of a man accused of killing two protesters. Before making his way back home to Illinois back in August, Kyle Rittenhouse allegedly shot two protesters in Kenosha, Wisconsin. ABC4 investigator Jason Wynn joins us now live in studio. You're following this story today. You found this paramedic, so who is he?
Well, Glenn, his name is Craig Shepard, and he's a paramedic for West Valley City Fire Department. Officials tell me he used his government email account to donate to Kyle Rittenhouse's defense fund. The Guardian first reporting Friday morning a Utah paramedic donated to a defense fund for Kyle Rittenhouse. The Guardian reports this donor gave $10 to Rittenhouse on the 30th of August. That was 5 days after police say Rittenhouse shot and killed 2 protesters in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Rittenhouse seen here with his hands up as police moved past him. Officers say he then made his way home to Illinois before authorities made an arrest, charging him with homicide. Rittenhouse says he was in Wisconsin to help protect property as others protested the death of Jacob Blake. I went to Shepard's home to get his side of things, but those inside the home didn't want to talk. West Valley city officials tell me in a statement, "We can confirm that Craig Shepard is an employee of the West Valley City Fire Department. We have become aware of a donation made using his government email account. We are conducting an investigation into this matter. However, such a donation would be representative of personal actions and not those of West Valley City." Officials tell me Shepard will not be placed on administrative leave during this investigation. It's not clear how long that will take. Glenn?
It's not clear how long it's going to take. The investigation, and he won't be placed on administrative leave. $10 donation. You know, everyone's entitled to their defense. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty. But we have to track down some random paramedic in Utah and get his side of the story about his $10 donation. I mean, what does this say about us right now?
Such hard-hitting news. I mean, this is why I just love local news media, right? They're so, and this is our investigative reporter. Give me a break. These guys are buffoons.
They need to focus
sick.
on the scammer businesses, you know, taking our money and not doing an oil change or something, you know. Let's get.
How about our vice president? How about our vice president that donated money to, you know, get looters out of jail? I mean, to the tune of, you know, probably several $1,000s. What, you know, where's the equivalent outrage to that? I mean, and really, this was a defense fund. It wasn't like, yeah, I don't know. It's, you know, over $10.
It's just kind of blows my mind about, you know, the things that these journalists are willing to do nowadays. They see other people doing it. I don't know what the first instance of this was. Kind of a, you know, let's track down somebody who supports someone else. I do recall. I think it was local news also. There was this Facebook group that was talking about some conspiracy theory that I'm going to get some of the details wrong, but the general idea is right. There was this grandma that this news corporation tracked down, and they wanted to know why she was a member of this Facebook group that supported, it was like QAnon, or it was some sort of thing that was in support of President Trump. And so they had to go down there and confront this old lady who, she was just a member of a Facebook group. And so that's why I'm asking, what are we coming to? What are they learning in journalism school? First of all, you go to school. I'm assuming this gentleman went to school for journalism. Is this one of the classes? Is this an elective credit, or tracking down some rando people in the street? And, you know, that's
because they have a belief that we don't agree with. Yeah.
It's one of those things that I didn't think that they would teach in school. So we're here. This is Citizen Representatives. I'm gonna share a video. This is something that I produced, and Adam, you may not be able to see it, but you can hear it. And I'll edit the video into the feed after this. Citizen Representatives reduces corruption in politics by uniting as legal citizens to elect lawmakers with the ironclad agreement that they will vote on bills according to a majority vote by citizens in their district or state. Subscribe to this channel, like this page, or visit sitreps.org to find out how. So that's just a little promotional video that I put together yesterday. I think we'll be doing more things like that. I've started an Instagram account by the name of Citizen Representatives. So that's also available. We'll be sharing, so far I've been sharing quotes on freedom and, law and government. the type of thing that citizen representatives is all about. And we've received a good reception so far. So, it's just some of the things that we're doing. Adam, how is the Project Goodwill that you're working on? How's that coming?
It's good. We got a video up. We have another one on its way and another work in process. They doesn't have a lot of views yet. I think part of the issue is we did the Project Goodwill video with the full reading of the declaration, which is probably takes about 4 or 5 minutes. And I think these short segments are probably better. So we're going to try something that's a little bit shorter at some point that just kind of hits hard on the topic of goodwill. And I like what you've done with the promotion of citizen representatives. It's, the quick hits in our attention deficit society seems to be what attracts people and gets people looking further if they're going to investigate further.
So I'm still working on this, figuring out Instagram. Adam's wife and a friend have been working on an Instagram for the Goodwill Project, and I'm looking for tips there. Just so many interesting things going on right now. So I think we mentioned this last week, but I didn't really get into it. And there's some more kind of story. There's some more of the repercussions that have come from this story. So approximately a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, Project Veritas did a sting on a CNN executive or producer. They had a volunteer go on several dates, I think up to 5 dates with this person. And so they were able to gain this person's trust, and there were hidden videos, and he just kind of spills the beans on the whole big picture at CNN and what they do. And it was very eye-opening. And some of the main points were that he did admit that CNN airs some form of propaganda. And one of the main pushes that they did that he was very interested in was getting Trump out of office. And what's interesting, as an aside, now that Trump's out of office, they're in certain demographics, their viewership is down by 50 and 60%. So, too bad for you. Without CNN, Trump wouldn't have lost. I think Trump had some of his own missteps. CNN obviously had some sort of impact, but Trump, if he would have done just a couple things different, I think he may have.
Well, and
won.
it was more than just CNN. I mean, it was a pretty much mainstream media blackout. Between social media, hosting platforms, and regular news media. I mean, everybody had that focus.
Well, what's amazing to me is how well they can coordinate without seemingly having to communicate directly. There's just kind of an idea out there that we have to get one person, or we have to glom onto this particular story, and they all know what to do and kind of the talking points. Maybe there is kind of a centralized talking points memo, so to speak, that goes out. I know that's a term other people use, but it's just so interesting. And another part was that they said that after COVID, kind of the hype about COVID kind of peters out, that they will push climate fear, because fear is what sells. So
Yep.
Let's go to, I'm just going to click on this. We're not going to play any videos, but I do have links to the Project Veritas videos in the description. So I'm just going to quote some of the things that they say here. And so what I'm doing this with the intent of I want the listeners to kind of just think about what you hear in the news nowadays, and kind of hear it from the other side of who's actually producing the news, and to see if you agree with it, to see if because a lot of people went right along with this and believe everything that they're told on these. And that doesn't just go for CNN, that doesn't just go for MSNBC or ABC or even Fox. There's people get into this a certain thing that resonates with them emotionally, and they tend to believe everything that comes out of there. So this is CNN technical director Charlie Chester. And this is kind of a paraphrase. Look what we did. Look what we did. We, meaning CNN, got Trump out. I am 100% going to say it, and I 100% believe that it wasn't for CNN. I don't know that Trump would have got voted out. I came to CNN because I wanted to be part of that. So we can definitely see that. I mean, okay, next line, Trump's hand was shaking or whatever, I think. We brought in so many medical people to tell a story that was all speculation, that he was neurologically damaged and he was losing it. He's unfit to, whatever. We were creating a story there that we didn't know anything about. That's what I think, that's propaganda. So there were so many of these stories. So you had Trump, he stumbled on a stair once. And they made a big deal about it. Apparently, I don't watch the news. Did they make a big deal out of it, or am I?
They made a huge deal out of it. Yeah. Like
So then you
days
have
and
Biden.
days of coverage.
Was it really?
I don't know. I mean, yeah. I mean, all I see is other media outlets making fun of CNN and MSNBC for making a big deal out of it. That's how I find out.
So then he goes on to say, we would always show shots of him, Biden, jogging, and that he's healthy, and him in aviator shades, like you paint him as a young geriatric. So that's what they're doing right now. Apparently he went and did a round of golf, but there are no pictures of him actually playing golf, just him in some golf shoes, like next to a golf cart. And
I think Buttigieg picked him up at the first tee and took him to the 18th hole, and they had lunch. I think that's what happened.
they did, yeah. That's a very good point. They have some practice in that. So then there was this story that Biden was refuting. Biden said that there's a panic and a kind of a big problem at the border. And then his handlers came out and said, actually, that doesn't represent the views of the administration. Did you see this?
No.
It was a small story, but it was just very funny. Like Biden is not the administration. It's like he went and said something that was true, that the quote unquote administration, that's not really the administration's idea. So he said something about the border that
was
running
actually
this?
true.
Who's running this? So we have the next line, Chester. I think there's a COVID fatigue. So like whenever a new story comes up, CNN is going to latch onto it. They've already announced in our office that once the public will be open to it, we're going to start focusing mainly on climate. So Chester, it's going to be meaning CNN's focus. Like our focus was to get Trump out of office, right? Without saying it, that's what it was, right? So our next thing is going to be for climate change awareness. Next line, Chester, it, meaning COVID, will taper off to a point that it's not a problem anymore. Climate change can take years. So they'll, meaning CNN, will probably be able to milk it quite a bit. Climate change is going to be the next COVID thing for CNN. Fear sells. So right on cue, let me share this. This is the tweet from CNN. The pandemic has given us a trial run. This is, of course, after that. So it's not like they didn't know that the Project Veritas video was out. They knew it was out. The pandemic has given us a trial run. Experts say that COVID-19 pandemic has taught hard lessons that countries can use to tackle another major global crisis, climate change.
It's as if it's a new, like this is a new endeavor. They've been pushing this for years and years, but now they're going back to old reliable, I guess. Oh.
Well, this is something that I recall when I was in elementary school. I I remember watching videos saying, so the elementary, well, the one I remember in middle school was one that we were going to run out of oil in. It was like 10 or 15 years from that point. Well, now it's 25 years past that point, 20 to 25 years past that point. And we haven't run out of oil yet, and I think we're producing more oil than we've ever produced.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
just kind of amazing what they're doing here to us. Next one. This is from CNN PR. Tune in Friday, April 23rd at 10 p.m. for CNN, the Climate Crisis Town Hall, which coincides with this week's celebration of Earth Day and the Biden-Harris administration's conference on global warming. Should be the Harris-Biden administration. So I remember feeling so guilty about climate change when I was
Really?
young. I'm serious. Like I was like, if there was a way for me to, this is gonna sound, I don't know how this is gonna sound. If I were able to inhale all of the pollution from all of the cars at once, and like I'd be willing to die for that, so I could inhale it all at once and just take it for a day.
Take for the team.
You'd take it for the team, and I was, that was my kind of childlike mentality at the time, and I was willing to do that because I felt so bad about it.
Wow. Wow. Well, we should probably say, look, we're all for clean air, clean water, um, better energy, more efficient for the world, right? It's just that their solutions are usually so over the top and so exaggerated that it's just not realistic. If people aren't talking about nuclear power, they're not really serious about the climate and improving conditions on the earth, as far as I'm concerned. But it's interesting that you say that you actually felt such guilt. I'm a little bit older than you, so I didn't quite catch that in my youth. They were still talking about an ice age when I was growing up, and an imminent ice age. But in Apocalypse Never, written by Michael Schellenberger, he talks about this aspect of young people and this fear that gets into them, and they become very depressed about life. And unless the only way they come out of their depression is usually if they take up, this happened with Greta Thunberg, actually. Her own parents said as soon as she took up the cause of climate change and became an activist, her whole mood and demeanor and well-being, improved. And so she felt like she could actually do something about this supposed apocalyptic condition. But a lot of kids just get depressed and over something over which they have no control, and for which most mainstream outlets are not giving real solutions. They're not talking about nuclear power, and they're not talking about developing third world countries the way they need to evolve. Instead, they're trying to leapfrog everything and give everybody windmills and solar panels, which is just a disaster. It will never work. It's not energy dense enough, and we can't even begin to understand the actual damage that windmills and solar panels will cause to the environment. I mean, we have evidence of it, but so anyway, sorry. I usually, you say climate, and I want to go off.
You just got triggered.
I did. A trauma, a previous trauma got triggered.
Well, I don't know what snapped me out of the guilt. I mean, I still, my dad always taught me to clean up after ourselves. So I remember I had some friends at a house nearby, and they were eating something, and one of them threw garbage, they just littered on the ground, and it kind of blew away. And my dad, he walked, it was probably 50 yards. He saw it, and then he walked 50 yards out of his way and went and picked up that garbage and went and handed it back to my friends. It was a little embarrassing to
Yeah.
me at the time, but in retrospect, I'm like, okay, well, that's where I get it. I'm picking up after myself. Of course, I don't feel a guilt now that just my being and my breathing is harmful to the environment, although it may be to some extent.
Right.
I just don't feel that guilt anymore. And anyway, I going back to CNN. So CNN, they used to have what's called Channel One. Did you have Channel One when you were in school?
No, but my
Are you familiar with the
daughter
concept?
in her special needs class, she listens to it every day,
I think
and
it's
she
called
actually gets
CNN.
traumatized by it.
Sorry to interrupt. So I think it's called CNN 10 nowadays. But
Yeah, that
back when
sounds
I was in it was in middle school, they outfitted Channel One outfitted the entire school, every single classroom with a TV. This was my understanding of how they did it. In exchange for we had to watch Channel One for 10 minutes a day during a scheduled time. And so and Anderson Cooper was one of the main people on there. So I'm pretty sure it was the same company, the Channel One and the CNN 10. I remember them doing a story. They came to my hometown because there was a proposed coal mine nearby that was they were gonna mine this coal, and those coal trucks were gonna come and drive through our town every day. And so they were doing an environmental story about how that was going to be detrimental to the town. And I remember they came to our class. It was, I think it was in AP English, and they came to our class and asked for input from the students. And so they'd record us. And I remember raising my hand, and I don't even remember what I said, but I was just trying to say something, and it didn't make it on the news, luckily, because it would have been highly embarrassing because I didn't know what I was talking about back then. But CNN, they have and all the news, they have this kind of their deal is stoking emotion and fear, and they were doing it with that story. They do it all the time. So going on to because the Project Veritas, they did this, they released this in several different clips or videos, and I'm sure that you can watch the whole unedited version of it because everyone says, "Oh, that Project Veritas, those videos are heavily edited." Well, you can't just sit down and watch 4 hours of video. Like, there's chit chat, the stuff that's not relevant.
right.
So the next part of this is they're talking about there's an art to manipulation, inflection, saying things twice. It's always like leading them in a direction before they even open their mouths. So in this, where to go? Sorry, my links weren't right. So CNN technical director Charlie Chester, any reporter on CNN, what they're actually doing is they're telling the person what to say. So this is pretty damning to pretty much anyone who appears on CNN. Because what it means is unless you're willing to say whatever you're told to say, you're not going on CNN. Am I taking this the wrong way, or is this did we already know that, Adam?
Uh, I I think it's pretty clear. I mean, I don't think Brian Stelter has his own thought in his own head. I think it's just kind of it goes in and comes out. So that
Teleprompter.
makes sense to me. Yeah.
So new line. It's always like leading them in a direction before they even open their mouths. The only people that we, meaning CNN, will let on the air, for the most part, are people that have a proven track record of taking the bait. Ooh. Chester, COVID, gangbusters with ratings, right? Which is why we constantly have the COVID death toll on the side, which I have a major problem with how they're tallying how many people die each day. I mean, okay, so those are slightly two different things, but it's kind of along the same vein of we're putting things on the air that we don't necessarily believe in. At least this guy didn't. We put people on the air that will say what we want them to say to follow the the written talking points of the day, regardless of what they want to believe. This is pretty crazy.
And if you want your
See,
paycheck, you'll say it.
it says it's fear. Fear really drives numbers, meaning TV ratings. Fear is the thing that keeps you tuned in. Chester, the special red phone rings and this producer picks it up. You hear murmurs. You hear, and ever so often they will put it on speaker, and it's the head of the network being like, there's nothing you're doing right now that makes me want to stick. Put the COVID death toll numbers back up, because that's the most enticing thing that we had, so put it back up. Chester, no one ever says those things out loud, but it's obvious based on the amount of stories that we do. The fact that we have a segment called The Good Stuff, which is a feel-good thing, but it's a dedicated moment at the end to almost be the ice cream to alleviate everything you've been through, something sweet to end with, because everything else is doom and gloom. So the news has an incentive to say things just to keep us watching, to keep that adrenaline going, to keep that dopamine hit going. And how do we disconnect from this, Adam? I don't know.
Well, I think it takes voices, and it was kind of refreshing. Every once in a while, Bill Maher, who's typically very leftist leaning, he started to call out some of this, and I think this week he called it. He said we got to stop with the COVID fear porn. It's not helpful. It's not accurate. And he's spoken out against cancel culture as well. So it's going to take voices on both sides. We seem so divided left and right in this country for the most part, but it's going to take voices from the left also calling this out, and hopefully voices on the right stand up and are firm against this type of stuff. But you see news outlets on the right engaging in fear porn as well. I mean, I don't think like a Fox News is immune to building up the hype. Everybody wants to, and I think a lot of it comes from, we got to be sensitive. People are dying. Yeah, there's terrible stories out there. I mean, people are dying from COVID. It has been a hard thing, but is it everything that it's been built up to be? And are we making it worse by talking about it constantly so much and inflating the numbers, and not reporting honestly, telling people they have to wear masks or they're going to kill people? I mean, that kind of language is just irresponsible.
So I watched a little Twitter video yesterday, and this mom was in a store and she had a can of Lysol. It appeared to be Lysol, and she was spraying it in front of her kid as
she's
she
walking
walked.
through.
Did you see this?
No, but I can just see it just throughout the whole store.
Yeah,
This
just
constant
the whole
vapor
time.
just
I don't
descending
know
on
if
the
it was.
child.
I don't know if it was from the time she walked in, and maybe it was air freshener, maybe the kid had passed some gas, but I'm assuming, maybe had a stinky diaper, but I'm assuming that it was Lysol. So I could be wrong. Fact check me on that one. But it just appeared to me that it was like that, and so the fear
And does it
sells.
not
And,
occur? Does it not occur to us that a child inhaling a bunch of aerosol for a long period of time, or even a short period, might be more damaging than than the coronavirus?
she probably
Maybe.
gargles with it. It's like a
Yeah.
mouthwash. Maybe it was actually, it could have been
Everything in
essential
moderation.
oils. Could have been essential
Yeah,
oils.
yeah. It could have been something clean. It could have been, a so-called clean substance, little
Maybe it was
vinegar
holy
and
water or something like that. Maybe she blessed some water, and of course, being
I'm
silly
all for
here, but
that.
it was the idea was that going overboard.
Yeah.
Good essential oil. I like my lavender.
Put you to
So
sleep at
the
night.
third part, CNN Director Charlie Chester says network is trying to help the Black Lives Matter movement by protecting the group's narrative on race. I haven't seen anything about focusing on the color of people's skin that aren't white. Okay. Here's some more quotes. CNN technical director Charlie Chester. I was trying to do some research on the Asian hate, like the people who are getting attacked and whatnot. A bunch of black men have been attacking Asians. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, we are trying to help BLM. So they're, because you can't say white lives matter or even all lives matter right now. You have to be all in on this Black Lives Matter. And then they went to Asian Lives Matter. And then they found out, because there was some anti-Asian sentiment, and then they went into into some of the data and found out that much of the animus toward the Asian people was from black people, and which is, that's just what the data shows. And I think they quickly shut up about the Asian hate. I don't know. I don't get it. Like first of all, I'm not anti anyone. I'm pro everyone. I'm pro love. I'm pro this. I'm pro everything. I never saw the angle from, because the mainstream media always has to portray the white person as being the racist toward everyone. Did you see the angle? Did it make sense that white people were racist against Asians? What's the reasoning behind that one? Besides Harvard.
Yeah, yeah, right. Um, no, I mean, I think it started with the shooting in Atlanta, right, where the white guy went in and started shooting up the Asian massage parlors, and what, 6 out of 8 of the people that were killed were Asian, and so it was an opportunistic story. But like you say, the numbers don't support that there's specific white hatred. I mean, I think people, you know, even the numbers themselves deserve some context and looking into, why does this occur? Is it because Black communities and Asian communities collide more in the inner city? Is there something more to this than just simply the numbers themselves? But yeah, like you say, the narrative has to be the white man has to be guilty. Um, it's the majority in this country, and that's the in vogue thought. That's how if you can divide and conquer. It's this weird place. Like we used to be try to unify people and bring people together and see commonality and see appreciate diversity, but yet hey, we're all under one flag. We fight for the same freedoms. We want the same goodness and a strong economy. And now it's the more divided you can get people, the more hate you can create, the more fear you can drive, and that's good for media, I guess, and good for control. If you can control people's minds, you control society. So I think that's what it comes down to.
So another line in this, the optics of that are not good. I believe he was talking about the Asian and the black men. These are little things that are enough to set back movements, because the far left will start to latch on and create stories like criminalizing an entire people, just easier headlines that way, I guess. Chester, I haven't seen anything about focusing on the color of people's skins that aren't white. They, CNN, just aren't saying anything. You know what I mean? Chester, you can shape an entire people's perception about anything depending on how you do it. Of course, we're trying to shape people's opinions and perceptions here, but we try to do it in, at least I believe we're doing it in an honest way. We're presenting things that we believe in. We're not being sensationalistic. I don't believe. Maybe we are. But I just don't see. Are we to what they call a point of tension, that some of this is just going to explode? And is CNN going the wayside of the dodo bird, or will there always be this? What do you see, Adam?
I would hope that people kind of grow tired of this. That the more outrageous it gets, and the more crazy things that are said, the people will become wise to that, and they'll say, you know, it becomes a short period of time before you just start eating your own, right? If you attack people in enough ways and restrict language, restrict freedoms in enough ways, pretty soon you're going to eat your own. And some people will start wising up to this. And so hopefully, yeah, hopefully a CNN, people just tune it out because it is inflammatory. It just, and it's recognized as just spewing a groupthink that isn't in the best, really in the best interest of the country.
And perhaps it's just a matter of, people growing old and passing away, and there goes their core consumers, because cable is starting to be one of those things that the boomers do, and a certain subset of Generation X. Maybe it's just one of those things that goes, it's going to be like radio, or maybe radio is not the best analogy here, but it just becomes, why would I do that? Why would I watch that? I haven't had cable since 2010. We had satellite, I think it was 2010. And, how do I get by? I get by just fine. I think I have a generally a more accurate view of what's going on than most people who watch just the news on TV. Maybe I'm wrong, but if you look at the story that you mentioned, the Bill Maher segment, which I watched about a 7-minute clip. He talks about, first of all, he has to bag on the Republicans, and then he makes a bunch of mischaracterizations about Republicans. And everyone claps, like barking seals. And then he talks about the question was that he really brought up was, and there was a poll given, what percentage of people who get COVID have to go to the hospital? And the actual number, which I think I was close to, maybe I'm just saying that in retrospect, because I don't think I was ever asked that question specifically, but if I were to have been asked that question, I think it's between 1 and 10%. It's relatively low. Do you remember the actual number on that?
That sounds about right to me. I mean, I would say it's even lower, yeah, below 5%.
So
a lot of people probably, well, and it doesn't explain the whole story either. A lot of people probably go to the hospital just because, they get tested and they have shortness of breath in the night and they get fearful and they go get checked out and then they're out the next day. So there's a lot of those numbers too.
So, but the idea of this poll was they split it into Republicans and Democrats, and something like 70% of Democrats got the percentage that they estimated that got COVID that had to go to the hospital off by multiple factors. It was 70% of them thought that it was, above 50%. It was the numbers were ridiculously large. And so you can kind of see that in the different states that people are in, the red and the blue states. In southern Utah here, we just had I've worn my mask probably a total of like 3 hours during this whole thing, maybe longer than that. And, maybe I'm just, in my house all day and, whatever, but that's a whole other subject. But what I'm trying to get at is the Republicans, they had a better idea of what percentage of people had to go to the hospital. Is it because Republicans are better at math?
Could be.
I don't think that's necessarily true.
No.
I don't think that there's I don't think math is, your competency in math is, related to your.
Depends if we're talking
Republican
about
or
COVID or
Democrats.
budget.
Okay, when you're
Republicans' math hasn't been very good on budget lately.
No, I think once you're in politics, I think all of your math skills go away. When you're campaigning for office, your math skills tend to be pretty good when you're trying to get in. And then once you're there, then you forget all about what you learned in math, and addition and, things like that.
Maths.
Math. So but the general gist of what we're getting at is that people have pockets of misconception and illusion. And one of the big ones with Democrats is the COVID. And, Utah's been pretty much wide open for a while. My kids have been in school the whole year. They did have to wear a mask. There have been some mask mandates, but by and large, we've been open. Texas is pretty much open all the way. Florida is pretty open, and the media just cannot. They can't explain those numbers because the COVID numbers have plummeted, and it's a sight to behold, to be honest. So, I'm kind of laying the foundation here, and to talk about the Chauvin trial. Now, I don't know how far we're going to get into this, and if we really need to or want to, but Derek Chauvin is the police officer who very famously or infamously, whichever way you look at it, he had his knee on the back of George Floyd for, was it 9 minutes, something like that?
Yeah.
And George Floyd is on the ground. I can't breathe. And he eventually died. And so Derek Chauvin has been charged with 3 different crimes: second degree and third degree murder, and second degree manslaughter. Okay, so right now we're kind of setting the stage for some of the media manipulation that we've been talking about. Now, when this happened, all that we saw at the beginning of this was the officer with his knee on the back of George Floyd saying, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe." What we didn't have was any of the other body cam footage for a long time. And we didn't have any of the other evidence that we have now. And so the defense has made a pretty strong case to at least say that you can't prove beyond reasonable doubt that Derek Chauvin committed this with intent, that he did this, or that he even caused the death, because the defense's medical examiner testified that George Floyd had enough fentanyl in his system to cause him to die, and the symptoms that he had were consistent with fentanyl overdoses. In addition to that, he was shown in body cam to have been saying, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe," long before he was on the ground. So it wasn't like, that wasn't the first time he was saying that. And while I am not, of course, condoning what happened, if it is the case that he was killed because of the actions, I'm not condoning this. The defense has also shown that what was done was actual training that these officers had received. So you have all these factors that now the betting markets, from what I've read, they're showing that there was a big uptick in the betting markets saying that Chauvin would be acquitted. Now, just to go into now this is quoting from USA Today, so take this with whatever grain of salt or whatever, but this seems to be pretty straightforward. I don't see a spin in this particular part that I'm going to be talking about. So second degree murder is causing the death of a human being without intent to cause the death while committing or attempting to commit another felony. In this case, the alleged felony was third degree assault, and Chauvin was charged with committing or intentionally aiding in the commission of this crime. The second thing that he was charged with is third degree murder, which is unintentionally causing someone's death by committing an act that is eminently dangerous to other persons while exhibiting a depraved mind with reckless disregard for human life. And the third one is second degree manslaughter, is culpable negligence, where a person creates an unreasonable risk and consciously takes the chance of causing death or great bodily harm to someone. So these are the things that the jury has to weigh. Did he do these things? And I don't know. I didn't watch the case. I'm only reading kind of commentary about it. But what's your quick take on that, Adam?
Did you want me to give you the spoiler alert? Because
Yeah.
as we're doing this podcast, the verdict came in, and he was convicted of all three.
Are you serious?
Yeah, yeah. Now, I like you. I didn't follow the case. I don't know what was presented. I can't judge that. Maybe he was guilty on all three, as far as or maybe that would have been my perception. I don't know. But like you said, the media certainly did a job in pushing that narrative that way, and suppressing information initially that came out later that might have, um, at the very least, it might have helped subdue some of the emotion that was there early on in the summer when this first occurred. But passions were so inflamed and have continued to be so, and uh, I think that's where the media has really, and they've, you got to say they probably have helped drive this narrative, or this outcome in some way. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens on appeal. But yeah,
That will be definitely interesting.
convicted on all three for now.
So this is just an aside. I don't see how you can, for one act, how can I be committed of murder and, the different charges? That's a lawyer question.
Yeah.
But the question to ask is, how would we have voted knowing this goes back to the very first story that we talked about, which was the ABC4 reporter going and talking to a person who all he did was he donated $10 to Kyle Rittenhouse's defense fund. All he did was donate $10. Okay, and then you have reporters at your door. Think of what these jurors, the pressure that they must have had. Are they looking in their own self-interest, or did they look at the evidence and make a choice there? I don't know. Are they saving their skin? That's what people will debate for a long time. That's very interesting that it's already come back, because they only went into deliberations, yesterday or the day before? I mean, it hasn't been very long.
Yeah. Yeah. And just before the podcast, they announced that there was a decision, but they hadn't announced it until just a minute ago.
So now the question is, are there going to be riots regardless, or is it, because this is another thing, these politicians, they were maybe not explicitly, but kind of without saying so, kind of threatening that if this verdict doesn't come out the right way, there's going to be rioting. Am I taking that the wrong way, or am I missing it?
Yeah. No, and I think there definitely were some not so subtle hints that they'd like to see more of that, and that if the verdict didn't go their way, that should be the case.
So you have Maxine Waters. Before it came out, she flew in from D.C. to Minneapolis or Minnesota. I don't know if she went to Minneapolis. She sounded off on people need to take to the streets, and many people took that as a incitement to riot. It seemed to be far more than what President Trump did on the January 6th. You have the mayor of Minnesota. I was going to play these clips, but now I'm not. The mayor of Minnesota basically begging for a guilty verdict. And Joe Biden, he went and met with the family of George Floyd, and, came out afterward and said, basically, we hope we get the right verdict. And interestingly, the judge, the defense lawyer for Chauvin, after Maxine Waters says this, he brought it up with the judge, and the judge basically said, I'm not going to declare a mistrial, but you have a very good grounds for, in your appeal if it doesn't go how you want it. And I just don't think that this case has been fairly presented. First of all, they requested that the case be moved from where it was to somewhere else so that he could have a more fair trial. I'm not sure how you can do that in the internet age, in the age of communication. But you have these leaders of our country coming and basically saying, well, if we don't get our way, your city's going to burn, in so many words. And it's just so sad, the state that we become. And like I don't want to live on a floating island, but are we
Sure
going
you
to
do.
need to?
Summer
I'd
every
like to
day.
visit. No, I'd like to visit. Like, okay, let me take that back. At the very beginning, like when you're the only guy out there, that's one thing. Like when it's big and
Yeah.
like established and there's running water and, you know, I guess you could just jump in the sea, but I don't
We'll
know.
have running water day one, Tyler. Don't worry, and we'll even have internet.
Well, as long as there's water and internet.
Toilet
Anyway, I don't
paper.
know what to make of this. There's going to be a lot to come from this trial. I hope that there aren't riots. Now this man who appeared to many to, of course, he could have contributed to his death, but I don't know. I didn't watch the whole thing. I didn't see all the evidence, so it just didn't seem to me that they proved beyond a reasonable doubt that he did this on purpose, and maybe that's part of the a manslaughter charge. We're getting into legal weeds that I don't really know much about. Kind of the points that I'm trying to make today are, if you're watching the media and you believe any of it, you're on the face, you're kind of a sucker. I
Well,
mean,
that's a broad
am I
label.
being am I being too, is that too broad, or am I so
You're
what
insulting
do you
our
think?
viewers. No, actually, if they're watching this podcast, they're probably pretty well informed already.
That could be. So this is my general dist okay, this is kind of me, my words of advice for people. Distrust media stories as a default. Okay? So the default should be, for most people going into media stories, is to take it with a grain of salt. Like, okay, you're telling me this. First of all, why are you watching it anyway? Like, if you find a hobby besides watching the news, you got to unplug. Some people, that's all they're able to do. Some people, for whatever reason, that's all that they. But you got to find something more constructive to do besides spend your time in front of the boob tube. That's what my dad would always call it. And I don't think he was referring to. It was just kind of a zombie type deal rather than a curvy woman type deal.
Pirated HBO.
Yeah, something like that. HBO. So help me figure out the wording of this, Adam. So we have, when you're accused of something, you're innocent and proven until proven guilty. And so I think something along those lines, the news should be false until proven true. Maybe we can workshop that, make a little motivational poster out of it, post it on Instagram. But we need to come up with some sort of really catchy idea that the news is false until proven true. It's just an inverse world. It's a bizarro world. You've seen that, the Seinfeld, where it's the bizarro world. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
It doesn't ring a bell. No.
No.
But
Anyway,
I liked Seinfeld, but I didn't watch every episode 6 times.
I didn't either, but that one I do happen to remember a little bit. But you can see this also scripturally, because they talk about good being held as evil, evil being held as good. Things are kind of upside down. Can you explain that metaphysically?
Things are upside down. You're referring to the men will call good evil and evil good. Yeah, well, and it's so blatant. Like there's no shame in it, right? That's what's odd. Like if you call people out and say what you're saying is absolutely false and you're saying it's true, there are some people out there who just aren't even embarrassed about it. They just brush it off and they'll just keep repeating the lie until it becomes a truth. In in argumentation, they call that the big lie, right? You just
Yeah.
repeat something enough that it becomes true, and they're not embarrassed about it. They're not ashamed of it. They won't retract it. It's like the 60 Minutes story. They're whatever, just ignore it, right? We know that CBS knows that CNN's got their back, ABC's got their back, MSNBC's got their back, social media has their back. So it's not going to make the rounds to the point where there's pressure to retract those kinds of things. So that's what's really distressing about it, is that there is no shame in calling falsehoods truth. They're happy to do it because it pushes their agenda. And it's unfortunate that we have an audience for that and that in the world and that soaks that up, and maybe unwittingly or maybe willingly, I don't know.
I don't know that you're prepared to do this, but can you talk about, because when we talk about illusion, when you're caught up in illusion, you tend to be emotionally polarized. And this is kind of you look at things and they're backwards. They're upside down. They're backwards. You tend to see things that are you see them the wrong way. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, in the ancient wisdom, which I know sounds like this vague term, but teachings that are, you could probably find evidence of. I mean, you definitely can find evidence of this in the Bible and other, you know, the Quran, the Talmud. You'll find evidence of this. It's just you won't find it in this terminology. It's written in a different place in a different time. But throughout history, there are teachings that talk about different metaphysical concepts, and one of them is the idea that you've heard of chakras, right? Um, and you have 7 major chakra centers in your body. They start in the sacral and they go all the way to the crown of the head. People hear about the third eye, um, the throat, the heart, the solar plexus. And the solar plexus is lower emotion. And so this is the kind of emotion that it's raw. It's what drives, um, it's not necessarily connected to this sense of higher purpose and will, but it's very raw. It's very closely related to instinctive energies that we associate with the animal kingdom, right? Everything is based on stimulus and response. Lower emotions take that one step higher and add flavor to the instinct. So now not only are you seeing something and running, but you're also feeling fear or excitement or some other emotion. The problem is that it doesn't always represent reality. Like a stimulus doesn't necessarily mean that you need to react in a certain way or feel a certain way. We know this as we grow older. As we're children, we kind of learn and we go through this cycle. But a lot of times what happens is we never really grow up and become adults. We don't assess situations fully. We don't look at it from the so-called mental level and apply logic and reason and say, That's probably not a good response. Just because I'm angry with somebody doesn't mean I need to retaliate and lash out and hit or yell and scream, um, hurt them, hurt people around them. Those are the rational body reasons with those emotions and says, okay, yes, I'm a little excited. This person's out, caused me to have some undue feelings. They feel very strong, but I know the consequence of lashing out. And so um, the but what you're driving at too is that these emotions are very very much a reflection of the upside down nature. They're not accurate. It doesn't read the situation. It doesn't read the outcome of a response to that situation. It's not capable of it, and so it's just purely it's driven by uh, it's driven by itself solely. And a lot of times what feels right in a situation, like we see a situation like George Floyd, and this officer looks like he's doing something absolutely ridiculous, and we all condemn it, and we say that's going on too long. The guy's subdued, it seems, right? And his knee doesn't need to be on this guy that long. And boy, I just want to do something. I want to go punch somebody. Gosh, all cops are bad. Those are irrational responses that are based on this feeling nature that, yeah, we feel terrible for the individual. We have empathy. We want to do something to correct the situation, but our initial impulse is usually incorrect. And that's where we get in trouble. It's kind of like, you could apply it to climate change. There's something going on. We got to do this, but then it blows up into this monstrous thing where the world's going to flood within 10 years. We got to spend all kinds of money and do all this and that. And we haven't taken time to settle back and say, okay, let's look at the data. Let's look at the situation. Let's look at what's real for what can we really accomplish? Can we accomplish this? Is throwing all this money at this problem? And I think you can look at any situation in life and apply this principle. That it's the stepping back and saying, am I seeing something upside down? Just because it feels right in the moment doesn't mean that it's the right response. So I don't know if that's what you were looking for, Tyler. That was a little long, but it's a big question.
No, I appreciate that. Maybe also you can talk about, because when you're okay, we talk about this word polarized. When you're emotionally polarized, people tend to be, you also, emotional people also have logic. Okay, but there's kind of a percentage that you live your life by. So you can be, say, 60% polarized in the emotional and 40% logical. And is that am I generalizing that right, or are there other factors that go into that? And the percentages can vary. It can go from 60% on one side, that can go down to 40% on the emotion, and 60% logic. I mean, everyone has emotion unless you've had that removed from you. But am I generalizing that
Yeah.
too much?
No, and I think it's a totally valid point, and we shouldn't. The point is not to nullify or to discount emotions. I mean, I wouldn't want to live life without emotions, and you don't. It's not about suppressing the emotions. In fact, the emotional body, the ancient wisdom teaches, gets stronger. The more evolved you become, the more you start to think. Those energies only increase, and so it takes more mental energy. And we shouldn't confuse the brain, the calculating brain, with the mental capacity. Mental capacity has more of a wisdom aspect to it, where it can process. It's not just computing facts and figures, because some of the smartest brains in the world, the ability to calculate or to do complex problem solving, they can be very emotional, right? Without any, and sometimes without any being able to apply any wisdom to certain situations, or at least being limited in that aspect. So what you're saying is absolutely true, that it takes time and it takes exercise to actually, and I spoke before the lower aspect of emotions, but there's a higher aspect of emotions that's more closely aligned with the heart center. And the heart center does take into account the wisdom from the third eye, and is able to examine situations and apply solutions more thoughtfully, and not just rush to judgment and rush to feeling as a means, you know. And there's this is the longer conversation, but there's been an incredible, if you look over the past 150 years, there's been an incredible emphasis from certain parts of society and culture to accentuate the feeling nature and to glorify it and actually say it's above the mental nature. And they do this, you know, through literature and through film, and it's interesting when you have that in your mind and you start to watch portrayals of this, especially in art. You can see how they try to make the emotional body more important and take precedence over the mental body, and that's unfortunate because they both enhance each other. But the mental body is the higher of the two, and needs to be exercised more diligently in order to tame those lower energies.
So we've got the emotions, we've got the mind. Is that what you're kind of referring to, the mental?
The mind, yeah, but not to be confused with pure brain calculation.
And then you have
brain function.
And then you have intuition, which is another possibly a level above that. And there may be other levels above that. That, you know, a connection to some would call it God. Some, you know, the one, the source. You know, being connected with that, and maybe we're getting beyond the purview of this this podcast, but we're trying to make some points about, you know, how we make decisions, how we decide to do things. Another thing that I'd like to talk about just for a moment is, and maybe I'm misunderstanding this kind of principle, but you know, the emotion, you know, that's one thing. The emotion, when it's presented with the logical argument can see what the emotion is saying, but the emotion can't understand what the logical thing is saying. And that's also true for when you go from maybe the logical to the intuition. There's people who are purely logical, but they don't have that connection to receive information or things from outside of themselves, and they're not able to see that part. So there's kind of a one-way street. The higher can recognize the lower, but the lower can't necessarily recognize the higher. Is that, am I on the right track with that?
I think you've said it succinctly and very accurately. Yeah, that's a really good point.
So now that doesn't mean that people, like we were alluding to and talking about earlier, that doesn't mean that people are purely emotional, because there's a mix of the emotion and the logic. But when you find yourself making decisions based on emotion, that's when you tend to see things backwards and upside down. And that's what we're trying to talk about here. I think that possibly these, you know, so much of what we're seeing now with what we talked about with CNN, with all the news sources, they're playing purely on your emotions. Emotions are, you know, one of the few things that I regret from my mission. I remember this pretty distinctly. You know, we're asked to teach discussions at the time. We call them charlas, and we were supposed to keep track, and we had goals to teach a certain number of these. Well, I used fear and guilt to try to teach this discussion to a person just to get a number. And I look back on that, and I only recall that one instance, and I don't think I did it any other time, but I really feel bad about that, because I used fear and emotion. Well, you don't want to go to hell, do you? Something along those lines. So why wouldn't you listen to us, you know? and I'm glad that it was only the one time. And I think it may have been me kind of, touching the hot stove once, like, oh, I didn't like that, and, so, that's what we're trying to talk about here is recognizing when you're making decisions based on the wrong thing. And, maybe that's a fool's errand. Maybe we have no chance at doing that, but, it's something that we're striving to do. So Adam, do you have any last thoughts before we wrap it up?
One thing that sticks out is you were talking about the story of the paramedic in Utah and comparing that to, say, a news reporter going and investigating a politician or somebody in the public eye or a group, an organization, and doing some investigative reporting. And I think this is where it gets really scary, that it's fine to have disagreement, but suddenly it's not fine to have certain views. And they're not just going after the politicians who may say something on TV and say, well, there's more to that Kyle Rittenhouse. Did I say Chauvin earlier? Kyle Rittenhouse story. Now they're going after the individual. This is you and me. And, the little guy that doesn't have the same voice, that hasn't asked for the limelight and the attention. And this is where it gets really scary. It's, and once you see the example, if you're the average Joe and you see the paramedic next door getting, maligned on local news TV for a $10 donation, you think, I'm next. I better mind my P's and Q's. I better not support anything, that they say is bad. That's where it gets scary. And that means even more so that we have to stand up and not be afraid and just say, I'm gonna vote, think, do, act, donate how I want to, and based on my own judgment and not because of the media narrative.
I think that's a good place to end off. This has been another episode of Citizen Representatives Podcast. You'll find us available on Apple Podcast, on Spotify, Google Podcast. We're on Facebook, YouTube, and like I mentioned earlier, a new account on Instagram. So please follow us there. Please like this podcast if you did enjoy it. Please visit our website, citizenrepresentatives.org, or short one, citreps.org. Both will go to the same place. We really appreciate you spending time with us and listening, and we would appreciate some feedback, and we will catch you next time.